How's it going, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Listen, today's video is all about what I think is the most important component of your snowmobile, and that's the track. So we're going to talk about inspection, we're going to talk about maintenance. Most important, I'm going to talk about track tension, and I'm going to talk about what I think is the best track tensioning tool available. So we're going to do all that in 2 seconds, so stick around. So whether you're a more experienced rider or you're completely new to snowmobiling, it's a good idea to have a basic understanding about tracks. All right, guys, so let's just go through some basic construction of a snowmobile track and some of the things that you're looking for when you're inspecting it. All right, so your track is made of one piece. It's vulcanized rubber that's reinforced with a fiber, like a Kevlar or a polyester fiber, to give it strength. And you'll see those threads poke through in certain places, and that's normal. So if you've been spinning a track on a hard surface, for example, that's a fairly thin piece of material. So you will see spots on this track where those threads pop through. If you see a few threads here and there, it's not a big deal. If you see big, huge patches of that weave showing through or tears in the track, then that's a concern. All right, the next item on a snowmobile track, obviously, is the paddle. Sometimes you hear this called a lug. And there's different types, there's different patterns. This particular one runs the entire width of the track. Now, this is just sort of a basic all-purpose track. It's not an overly expensive one. Some tracks will have a much bigger lug, like a 2.5 or 3-inch paddle on the track. And some of them will be sort of individual paddles rather than the one wide one that goes across this track. That type of paddle is a little bit more apt to tear off. So that's the one thing you're doing when you're inspecting your track. You want to make sure that none of the paddles are ripped or torn. You've got a square opening or a window in the track, and between each of those you have a metal clip. So what that metal clip is for is to ride on top of this piece of plastic here. So this piece of plastic, now it's actually called a slider shoe. Usually you hear them just referred to as a slider. Sometimes you hear them called a high fax. But if you look, and we'll hold this down, you can see that metal clip rides on that. Now the reason you have that, this aluminum runner here, if that was sitting right against the track would wear out faster. So that's why we have the metal on here. So the flip side of that is that this piece of plastic protects this runner so that neither the track or the runner wear off. This wears out and the clips can wear out. And if you can see on this track, those clips are actually getting pretty rusted. What happens if they get too rusted, they actually get a little bit of abrasive. So that's something you may want to replace, or you may just want to clean them up with a wire brush. Okay, the other part of the track that's fairly important are these track guides on the inside of the track. They ride inside the idler wheel. They have a couple of jobs. So one, they keep the track aligned and straight. The other thing, that's what the drive sprockets press against. So if any of these were damaged for any reason, then it might make that track ratchet. All right, guys, so it's not rocket science, right? There's not a lot of things you need to inspect, but it is really important that you inspect them. So I would say at the beginning of the end of the season, give your track a good spin around and check all of those things, right? Are any of those paddles or lugs ripping off? Is it missing any clips? Are they bent? Are they loose? Obviously, any tears. Again, the track is pretty tough. It's not just going to rip and break easily, but, if you see any major damage there, it's time to replace that track. There's not a whole lot to do in terms of maintenance of the track. One is get yourself some kind of a lift or a jack stand that you can hold the back of the sled off the ground when you're not using it. The other thing you want to do is just keep it clean, right? Because any material that's in there, especially anything that's abrasive like grit, you want to get that off. You can just get a good stiff brush and just go over the track. Particularly at the beginning and end of the season. You can knock stuff off of it after you ride when you put it away for the day. And then the other thing to do, again, sort of beginning end of the season, is just wash it all down with some warm soap and water. All right, guys, so that's pretty simple, but it's pretty important, and so is the next topic, and that's track tension. Okay, so track tension is how tight the track is on the snowmobile, and that's really important. So if your track is too loose, then it may ratchet around the drive sprockets. If it's too tight, then you may get wear along the entire length of the rear suspension. So your sliders may wear out prematurely, the bearings in your idler wheels may wear out prematurely. So it's important that you have it set right. Now, some guys will run their track a little bit looser than what the manual recommends. The thinking there, particularly guys that race their sleds, is that they'll squeeze out a little bit more horsepower. Or really what they're doing is they're using a little bit more of that horsepower for forward movement as opposed to overcoming the friction in the rear suspension. Again, the specifications in the services manual, they're the optimal settings for general use. So that's where I keep mine. Okay, so a couple of things we're going to do before we start. We're going to take the drive belt off the snowmobile because we need the belt to be able to move freely. We're going to make sure that all the snow and ice is off of the track, okay? Next thing we're going to do, we're going to lift the back end of the snowmobile right up off the ground. You want at least 3 inches under the entire length of the track. All right, so the way you measure the tension or the tightness of something flexible like a belt or a snowmobile track is called deflection. So it basically means how far is this going to move when I exert a specific amount of force on it. So for my American friends, for this model of snowmobile, I want 1 and 25/32 of an inch to 1 and 31/32 of an inch when I exert 16 pounds of force. In metric, that's 45 to 50 millimeters of deflection when I exert 7.3 kilograms. So that's where this tool from Woody's Traction comes in. So this is ideal because it measures both the distance or the deflection and the weight. And the way I do that is I have a little rubber O-ring on each end. So on this end, I have the amount of force that I'm exerting, and I'll set that to my 16 pounds or 7.3 kilograms. And on the other end, I have the deflection or how far that track is going to move. So I'm going to set that to my 45 to 50 millimeters. And then I'm going to come to the center of the track. So I want the midpoint between the front and the rear idler wheel. So that center point's about here, and ideally you want to be on a clip. And you're going to press down until the O-ring meets the white top of that tool. And then we've got just about right. So my deflection or the tension on this track is just about bang on. Okay, but if your track tension is not bang on, then you're going to need to adjust it. And we'll get to that in a second. It's pretty straightforward. There's a couple of reasons why track tension may change. Now, the newer tracks don't stretch as much as the old rubber ones used to, right? Because of the composites they're made with. There's a couple of things that will throw it out. Now, obviously, if you change a track, you're going to want to tension the track again. The other thing that'll throw track tension out is studding, right? If you've studded your track, then you should check the tension. If you have idler wheel caps, you're going to want to pop the back one off, because we want to be able to get at the idler wheel bolt. Now it may be different on your sled. On this one I want a 16 millimeter wrench, and I'm going to loosen this bolt off. So there'll be some variation in design from machine to machine. Some of them will have a little jam nut here that you'll have to loosen off first. This one doesn't. And this one is a 16 millimeter on this sled as well. You can use a wrench or a socket for this. So basically what you're doing, you're going to turn this bolt. If you're going to turn it clockwise, you're going to move that axle back. If you turn it counterclockwise, you're going to move it forward. Moving it back is going to tighten the track. Obviously, moving it forward is going to loosen the track. Okay, then each time you make a slight adjustment, you're going to come back and you're going to check the deflection of the track again. Now, once you've set the track tension, the next thing you want to check is the alignment on the track. And that's really important, right? You want this track going straight. Because you can adjust these two sides independently, it's possible to get them crooked. So you want to do the same thing on both sides, but then you want to check the alignment. Now, checking the alignment is actually pretty simple. So if you look down here next to this slider, you've got these track guides. Okay, so you want to make sure that the distance between this track guide and this slider is exactly the same on both sides. All right, so where that gap is too wide, you're going to tighten the adjuster bolt, and that will narrow the gap. Or the flip side, if it's too narrow, you loosen the bolt and you'll spread that out. So you want both the gap the same on both sides. All right, so when you're all done, you got the deflection where you want it. You've got the track aligned nice and straight. Then you just go ahead and tighten up the rear idler bolt. And on this model, you tighten it to 35 foot-pounds, but make sure you're checking your manual. All right, guys, and that's how it's done using the Woody's track tension tool. Now, some guys will use like a luggage scale and a tape measure. You know, certainly that'll work. I'm a big believer that the right tool for the job is always a good investment. And I think in this case, this is the right tool for the job. There's a couple of things I really like about this. Obviously, you can check the deflection and the amount of force in one tool. So that's a plus. It's a well-made tool. The other thing I really like about this is that you push down on the track, right? So if you're using something like a luggage scale or a fish scale, or if you're, you know, some of the other tools on the market that hook onto the track and you pull down to measure the force. Obviously, if you look at where my snowmobile is, I don't have a big shop. A lot of you guys probably don't either. I can't get it up on a chain fall or up on 4 feet off the ground on a hoist, so it's hard for me to get under the sled and pull down on the track. The other thing I really like about Woody's is their customer service, right? And I've said this in other videos. It's something that's important to me when I buy a product, is any questions I've had about this, they've gotten right back to me. They're really friendly, really professional, and really knowledgeable. So that goes a long way as well. All right, guys, so I'll put additional information in the description for the video. I'll put the website address where you can get this tool. So I hope you found that video useful. If you did, do me a favor, mash that like button. If you subscribe to the channel, I try and post new content at least once a week. So until next time, I'm Dave Clark, and thanks for taking the time to watch.